To another edition of Tubi Horror Tuesdays on House of Shadow and Ink. I am your host, Kevin Lucia. I've got 6 more movies to share with you this week, so without further ado, let's dive in. The first one is 616 Wilford Lane. It's a story about a bereaved, widowed husband grieving the loss of his wife. He brings his adult daughters to this new town to try to start over. They want a new beginning, new house, that sort of thing. They end up buying this house that the realtor kind of pressures them into a little bit. It's this gigantic, almost mansion, and the husband is almost sure that he can't afford it. But the realtor offers him a deal he can't refuse. Come to find out, the previous owner kills his entire family and then commits suicide. And of course, the whole town covered it up, including the mayor, played by Eric Roberts, who actually plays it straight. No overacting or corniness here from him. And they had covered it up because they couldn't sell the house. Well, as the movie transpires and we get more and more supernatural shenanigans happening, doors opening and closing, knives flying through the air, entities pulling people under the pool, trying to drown them, people sleepwalking, they end up coming across the footage of this man who killed himself. And they take it straight to the town and threaten to sue over emotional damages. And Eric Roberts and his crew just settle up because they're anxious to avoid a scandal. And that's it? That's the movie? No. There is a twist at the end of this movie. I had a hard time deciding if I liked this one until the twist came. And at least I'll say the twist... the twist, you got to give it credit. It was kind of inventive. It went off in a completely different direction that you're not expecting. And the twist kind of made it worthwhile, especially the final twist. So it's a decent watch. Decently acted, well done. 616 Wilford Lane. The next movie is The Others. About this couple has been trying to have children for years, and the wife has had 4 or 5 miscarriages, so they finally decide they're going to adopt. And they adopt a young girl and bring her into their home. But the wife becomes convinced that they have brought something else with them, with the child. She's mute, she acts very strangely, she's always stealing stuff like drills and knives and hiding them under her bed, and it seems like she's maybe a little dangerous. And the mother becomes convinced that this child is dangerous. And then she mysteriously gets pregnant. And by mysteriously, I mean, boom, she wakes up one day and she's already shelling. So what exactly is she pregnant with? They have brought something into the house with this girl, but it's not the girl's fault. And I really, really liked this film, not only because of its mediations on the trials of trying to raise children and trying to conceive, but also had a really nice angle on this. The evil entity, there is an evil entity, it is attached to the girl, she brought it there, but it's not her fault. And it was a really, really nice film, so The Others. My third film is Simon Says. It's an okay film. A bunch of people have been catfished, men and women alike, to this big mansion because they were going to meet their internet lover in person for the first time. What they find instead is a locked mansion. They're locked inside, and there's this board game called Simon Says. It looks like a really old board game from like the 1800s. And it seems like a pretty typical game. You move your pieces around the board and you land in a certain spot and you have to pick a card and it says Simon Says. But the cards seem to read your minds and like dig up this past trauma. Like a card could say Simon Says, talk about your brother who died when he was 2. Weird things like that where it's like, well, this is not normal. What's going on here? Turns out this ancient demon or entity got stranded on Earth hundreds of years ago and is now trying to collect souls to power himself free of his prison. How many souls does he need? Apparently 1,000. Is there a quota? I don't know. It's 1,000 souls. And he traps people by playing this game. There's only one winner. Everyone else's souls get trapped after they play the game and try to power his release. It's an okay film. Decent production values, well enough acted. It has the pitfall that a lot of those movies do that are like right in the middle there, where some of the effects are just kind of, you're kind of wondering how do they produce these effects with some very cheap computer program probably. But other than that, it's not a bad movie. It's not a way to spend a rainy Sunday afternoon. Simon Says. The next movie is Lanterns Lane. Lanterns Lane is, again, it's a decent film. I wasn't sure if I liked this film until the twist happened. And then I was like, okay, I'm kind of in on this. It's kind of a classic story. A young woman comes back to her hometown after leaving to go to the city to find her fortune and to make something of herself. And there's a lot of that classic awkwardness you would expect. You know, friends that have been separated for a long time, they don't just automatically gel and like dial into old times. There's some awkwardness there. And they're at a bar, and they decide just for old time's sake, we should go up to Lanterns Lane. Apparently, Lanterns Lane is this area where the kids go drive up and park and kiss and make out and stuff. But there's a legend of an old woman who lost her husband and is continually searching for him in the woods with a lantern. And if you flick your headlights enough times in the woods, you should see the lantern floating across. Now, this was an interesting movie because it starts off with them suddenly not being able to start the car, and they end up going into the house, this old house. It's not even the original house. It's just built on where the ruin of this old woman's house was. It starts off a prank. You know, it wasn't like he really couldn't start the car, and it was just like a prank. Until this hooded figure shows up and kills one of their members, one of their friends. Now, I don't want to say too much more after this, but I thought this was going to be just a standard crazy stalker, stalking them, crazy stalker, psycho, stalking them at this house and killing them off one by one. But it wasn't. The twist that came, I definitely didn't expect, and I thought it made the movie. Up until that point, I was a little iffy on it, but I thought it made the movie. So yeah. Lanterns Lane. Another movie that I really, really liked was Winter Island. Now, trigger warning with this movie. This movie literally starts out with its first shot of a girl going out in the woods, climbing up a tree and hanging herself. Boom. So just, if there's anyone that has issues with that, just a trigger warning for that. Also a trigger warning for this movie. It does involve child abuse. But that's how the movie starts out, and it's a fantastic way to start, really, because we're left with a whole bunch of questions. Why did she do that? Why did she hang herself? And, of course, there's a search for her, because all they know at first is she's missing. The mom is really devastated and disconnected. Dad he's a very religious person, but now he starts becoming hyper-religious because he believes, like, the family's sin has cursed them all, and that's why his daughter has gone missing. And the son is just your regular son trying to figure things out. They live on a lake. In the middle of the lake is an island, and there's lots of rumors about this island, strange things that go on, that sort of thing. The son, becomes convinced that from their dock he can see his sister Abby walking around and sneaking around the island. Of course, there's several days of police searches and things like that, and he goes out there. He's not able to find anything either. But they end up discovering the rope on the tree, but then the girl's been buried. Who buried her? So there's a lot of mystery going on in this story, and it's a really great movie. This was probably my favorite, Winter Island. Very, very well acted, very well done. There's layered mysteries here. Why did she hang herself? Who cut her down and buried her? Why did the person do that? There's also a lot of tension between Abby's mother and Abby's uncle, and we think this guy's presenting himself as reformed, but I think you get the idea. He's a pretty bad dude. And Dad, of course, we've seen this a lot in the movies where he goes hyper-religious, goes into his son's room who loves horror and things like that, and tears down all the posters and things like that. And, because we got to make our house clean. I'm not going to tell you anything more else about this movie. It was really, really great. I really enjoyed it, and that's the best one of the bunch. Winter's Island. The next one. I can't say that this movie is good by any stretch of means. However, this movie has kind of gained a cult following, cult viewership, and it's got an interesting story behind it. So, back in the 80s, some guy that had a lot of money and not much more sense, this is not the movie, this is the background to the movie, decided he wanted to make a horror film. So he hired a bunch of people, You know, at least they had enough money for decent practical effects, because these effects are pretty 80s, but they're all practical, and they're not bad at all. And he shoots half the film. Then he gets mad at their direction, fires everybody, brings on a whole total new cast, new writers, and finishes the movie. And that, my friends, is how you get the movie Spookies. The setup of Spookies is these folks are randomly driving around. One guy looks like the biggest pastiche of like your tough guy with the short shirt, and it's a leather shirt and leather pants. And they're all looking for a party. Where they're looking for a party out in the middle of nowhere, I don't know. But they stop at this big, huge manor, and they thought, why not? Let's go inside. We got some beer. We'll go in there and party. What they find out, or they don't find out, is what we find out is there's some evil magician wizard guy who's trying to resurrect his dead wife who hated him anyway and give her eternal life, although she's really young, even though he looks like he's 105. And again, it's kind of like Simon Says, where he wants to trap souls to free his wife. I don't even have the words to explain this movie. The practical effects weren't bad. Like, if there was actual direction and actual writing here, and maybe even some passable actors, then this probably would have been a much bigger, like, it still would have been a 80s, monster feature that kind that you pick up at Friday night at the video store, just randomly. But it probably would have gained a little bit more following and be a little bit more noteworthy, because the effects aren't bad. They're very much 80s cheap. There's no comprehensive story here at all. You could very easily see the group of actors that got hired after the other ones were fired, because there's a whole set of characters that never encounter another set of characters, and it's almost like we have two very bad stories going on at the same time. But, my friends, Spookies is hilarious. It's a fun film. It's a little piece of cinema history. Like I said, the story behind it is fun. So if you're got nothing else better to do, and you've got a bunch of friends over, and you want to laugh, then I would recommend Spookies on Tubi. And those are my movies for this week. 616 Wilford Lane, Simon Says, The Lantern's Lane, Winter Island, The Others, and last but not least, Spookies. Go out, watch, and have fun.